Hello and welcome. My name is TyrionLanstr. Alright folks, so today I want to talk about all the changes we've got on Siege of Winterfell. So what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to break this up into a couple of different videos because there's just so much to discuss. But what I'm going to do is we're going to talk specifically about all the different commander skills, and I'm going to break them up. So this one is going to just be on the paid commanders, but not the top 6 commanders. As you can see at the bottom, I don't have them unlocked. I don't use them. I'll do a separate video discussing them. But let's talk about all the rest of them. And again, I'll do a separate video on the free-to-play commanders, and then I'll do a last one on those couple of legendary commanders. So what I've gone ahead and done ahead of time, just to make this a little quicker for you guys and easier to understand, is I've already written them all down right here. We've got a little note so that we can see what each of their skills are and what they do. So as you can see, there are a few general catch-alls, because these are ones that have the exact same ability. So Enzo, Lats, and Drake, all of them, their rage costs 650 right here. And then you get 900% of the troop stats. So in the case of Enzo, that's cavalry attack, defense, and health. You get 900% for 5 seconds. For Lyanna, Andrea, Miranda, and Melisandre, they do something kind of similar, where they give basically 900% of just attack and defense, no health, but they give it for 8 seconds. Also, note that it is a more expensive ability. It costs about 50 more. Also, I should add that none of these are including the passive stats that are given. All of those are just 8 times whatever the normal stat would be. So, for example, for Lyanna Waters, who gives 30% cavalry health, attack, and defense, multiply that by 8, you get 240. If you look back at Enzo for a second, he gives 40%. That times 8 is 320, so he gives 320% of each of his stats. Looking at Layla, Synara, Jaime, and Theon, they also are going to be a more expensive one, costs 700. Again, gives 900% troop attack for 5 seconds. So this is just attack, no defense or health. But it also has this ability where it reduces up to 3 enemies' attacks by 80%. Also for 5 seconds. So you can kind of think of that as, almost 980%, assuming all of the things are equal. I know that's not exactly how it works, but in terms of doing the math, getting a little bit extra because you're reducing the enemy. Also, I will add that this is nice because it reduces up to 3 enemies. So in theory, if you're getting pincer attacked, this is going to reduce all 3 of those enemies. Also, this might be something to consider if you're going to have a weaker lineup that isn't really meant to be doing a lot of damage, but you just want it to be basically buffing yourself and debuffing your enemies. This will affect your enemies, so it does help in that case. Next up, we'll look at Salma, Patello, and Rhea. And as you can see here, they're giving, for a much cheaper price, only 500 rage. They're going to give 300% defense for the 2 troops that they use. So Salma would be spears and cavalry. Rhea is cavalry and infantry. Patello is infantry and spears. They give 300% defense for 5 seconds. They also will heal a little bit. And I basically use these terms a bit... a tiny heal or a huge heal to represent the differences in the healing coefficient. This coefficient is 660. I don't know exactly what that coefficient means. I don't believe it means that they heal 660 troops, but it has some significance. Also note that this is going to be healing for 5 seconds, so it'll heal them each time a little bit for 5 seconds. Okay, so now comes the miscellaneous categories. These are each completely unique to that specific troop, or that specific commander, so I just wanted to separate them each individually. So next up we get is Seg. If we scroll down, I think I missed him. I'm sorry about that. Here he is, Seg's very first one. So his rage is about 600, so you get 400% counterattack damage for 5 seconds, and also a tiny heal because it's only 80 healing coefficient, so a lot smaller, also for 5 seconds though. Julian, a little bit different. Julian's going to be giving 50% spear defense for 6 seconds, and then also 1000 skill damage to 3 enemy troops. And that's only for 500. I just want to clarify that the skill damage, that to me just means like it's using this ability and it's going to deal a lot of damage. And its coefficient being 1000, I just called that skill damage, but that just is going to change how much actual attack it does. It's going to have a modifier based on how much troop attack that actually has. And again, please note the rages. The rage has not changed at all, so you get up to 1000 rage, and then it's going to use all the abilities that it can use. So if you have anything that has more than 500 rage, it'll use that once it's got up to 1000, and then it'll have whatever is left. I think that pretty typically you're not going to get 2 abilities in. Some of the free-to-play commanders have less than 500, but unless you have 2 500s back-to-back, you won't get 2 abilities to happen in succession. But I will say that if you get 2 to go in succession, that's going to be really, really strong. Just imagine for a second if you had, like, I don't know, Julian's 500 and Salma Rhea and Patello's, you're getting a ton of damage all of a sudden out on 3 enemy troops. You're also going to heal your troops a little bit, increase the damage, and you're going to get that little extra boost for the spears. I don't know that the 50% spear defense makes a whole lot of difference, but sure, it's there. Okay, next we have Annie. Annie's for 650 rage, 70% attack and heal. That's also going to be a slightly larger heal at 800 healing coefficient versus the 600 and 660 for Salma, Rhea, and Patello. Next we have Hector, also 600 rage. He has a much more damage skill attack. It's 1600, but it's only on 1 enemy. So actually between the 2 of them, I think Julian's is going to have more value if you're hitting in a group, because basically that's equivalent of 3000 skill damage because you're hitting 3 different troops with 1000. A huge spear defense buff of 1200, for 6 seconds, so definitely very, very good. Next up, we go all the way down to Simon. What we get here? Simon is definitely just a healer. Like, he's going to do a massive healing for 3 different allies. It's a huge 1800 healing coefficient, so that's literally more than double the Annie heal, which is the largest one we've gotten to so far. So definitely a really significant heal. And then it also removes debuffs, which is really noteworthy, and I think going to definitely help. If you think about, like, the Layla, Sinara, Jaime, and Theon ability where it reduces an enemy attack, it would remove that debuff, so you wouldn't be hurt by that. Just, it does note that you don't remove bleed abilities from commanders still. Okay, Marjorie is next. Marjorie's for 650 rage. She gives 80% skill damage for 5 seconds, and then also does a big heal, but it's just to herself. So the difference between Simon and Marjorie is that Marjorie doesn't heal your allies, it just heals you. So going back to my point about maybe having a, buffs and debuffs troop, you'd want Simon in that because he's giving that huge heal to yourself, but Marjorie isn't going to help you in that way at all. It also, again, does give some extra skill damage. I think that what I would recommend to people is trying to synergize someone like a Marjorie with, like, a Julian or a Hector that's doing skill damage. I think those are the same things in terms of the increasing the skill damage dealt, and then looking at one of those. So if we go back up to Hector, it is defined as a skill damage to the target troops at a damage coefficient. So I think those are related, and I would definitely try to synergize them. All right, we have just 2 more left. We're going to look at Kevin now. Kevin is actually very, very similar to Salma, Rhea, and Patello. You should really think of them as similar. It's the same rage cost. It gives slightly more defense because it's only to cavalry, so it's 400 instead of 300% defense. And it gives a slightly lesser heal. Instead of 660 healing coefficient, just 600 healing coefficient, but again, for that 5 seconds. So very, very similar in terms of what you're getting from them. And then last but not least, we have Raymond, 700 rage cost, definitely one of the more expensive ones. Gives only 60% normal attack and skill damage for 6 seconds. I don't think that's very strong for 700 rage. Feels a little bit expensive, but, if you like Raymond, go for it. Okay, so now in looking at all of them together, like, what are my general thoughts and what are the best? So I think that right off the bat, getting troop stats is always valuable. Getting 900% of all stats, or even just attack and defense, feels really, really good, and I don't want to undercut that. I think that's really, really valuable. I think that I like the idea of kind of categorizing these in terms of, like, which I use in which lineup. So I would say having a lineup that is going to be just crazy massive stats, right? So putting, like, let's say for me, I'm a cavalry castle, so thinking of it that way. If I have an Enzo and a Lyanna and together, they're going to have huge stats. And then in terms of my last one, maybe I think about doing either a Layla or a Salma. Maybe I do one of the other miscellaneous ones. I kind of would like to think about doing maybe an Annie or something with that, just because what I get from that is that Annie isn't giving me a ton of specific cavalry stats, but I'm getting some attack from her, and I'm getting a little bit of a heal on those troops, because these are my big buffed stats troops that I really want to be strong. So thinking like Enzo, Lyanna, and Annie, I feel like I would really like that synergy. It's a little bit expensive rage cost-wise, but you deal with what you got. The next one I'm going to talk about is kind of like my debuffing and, the one that I'm going to have to debuff my enemies and buff myself. So Simon is obviously a mandatory for this. 500 heal or 500 for a big heal, 500 rage that is huge. Like, that just feels so good. So I definitely want Simon in there. I'm also going to add that I really want Layla and Salma in there, because these are ones where I really want Layla in there, just because it's going to really help me to debuff my enemies. It's reducing their attack by 80%. So even if it's not helping that specific troop as much, it's helping my other main troop more. I'll add that Salma, definitely, because it heals a bit, I would say either Salma or Annie would have been good with that first group, and whichever one I don't use, I would probably use with this one as my secondary force, and I want that one to still be strong, and it's good to still heal myself, and just kind of keep them around for a little bit longer. Most of the time in Siege of Winterfell, getting your troops to heal a little bit is going to be really helpful, because you want to stay alive, whether it's in that circle or wherever else, for as long as possible. Last but not least, I want to talk about the kind of skill damage set. So if I'm doing a skill damage one, I definitely am going to want to do Marjorie and then either Julian or Hector, since those are the ones that have the skill attacks, and then Marjorie's one that gives the skill buff. I will be honest that I don't think these are a great synergy just yet, because I think it might take longer than 5 seconds to get my rage bar back up to 1,000 to be able to use the next one. But for sure, you should definitely make sure you do Marjorie first, then one like Julian or Hector afterwards. Again, that's really just for skill attacks, so I would maybe think about, considering these are all spears, maybe if you have a spear castle, do the 3 of them and really go all out with spear attack in that one, so that they can just deal a ton of damage to one enemy, or in Julian's case to 3 enemies, and try to just punch a hole through someone if you ever need to. So those are kind of the 3 categories that I see with it. I don't see a ton of application for Seg. I don't really love using either Kevin or Raymond. Kevin, to me, he's fine, but he just doesn't give the same passive stats that Salma, Rhea, and Patello do. And so for slightly lesser, for basically the similar ability but better stats, I'm going to go with them. And then Raymond, I just think that's way too expensive for not that much. And Seg, kind of same thing. I just don't think I'm getting a whole lot out of it. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you got an idea of what to do with the new Siege of Winterfell changes, and I'm really hoping that everyone gets something out of this. Like I said, I'll come out with another video soon doing the free-to-play and then the legendary commanders. Hope this helped, and until next time, my name is TyrionLanstr. I'll see you then.